Canada erupts. After Canada, Post goes bankrupt. Carney furious as economy collapses. Overnight, when was the last time you opened your mailbox and discovered anything that was of significance to you? A letter from a person you care about? Handwritten? Is it an emergency bill? How about a paycheck? The vast majority of Canadians have long since left those days behind them. Nowadays, bills are delivered by email, paychecks are put directly into employees' accounts, and letters have been superseded by text messages and video calls. Be that as it may, the expenses associated with delivering the mail are still increasing, despite the fact that Canadians are utilizing the postal service less and less frequently. This brings up a question that is central to the ongoing strike at Canada Post. Is the country paying more for less? And is it time to consider whether a national postal service, in its current form, can continue to exist? For the second time, Canada Post employees have gone on strike and left their posts. It feels like a regular, almost routine occurrence. Another conflict, another strike, another cycle of headlines. However, this one is different because it occurs at a time when even the federal government has acknowledged that the entire paradigm is not sustainable in the long run. Ottawa has communicated that extensive changes are inevitable, including the discontinuation of door-to-door delivery for millions of Canadians. Employment Minister Patty Hajdu is taking a more cautious approach this time, in contrast to strikes in the past, when the government hastily intervened with legislation that compelled rail workers and Air Canada flight attendants to return to work. She is certain that both parties should participate in negotiations. However, what is the reason for that? Is the government getting Canadians ready to embrace the truth that the postal service that they grew up with is no longer capable of surviving? Or is it possible that they are counting on the public's frustration to make it easier to accept changes? The financial position at Canada Post is so dire that it can only be described as shocking. Last year, the organization suffered losses amounting to more than $1 billion. Predictions indicate that the company's losses could reach $1.5 billion this year. During his explanation of the reason behind this, John Hamilton, a representative for Canada Post, was extremely open. He stated that the number of letters being mailed is decreasing each year, but the number of addresses being added to the delivery network is increasing each year. Taxpayers are left to make up for the difference when costs increase but revenues decrease. The regulations that govern the way that Canada Post conducts business were established in 1994, which was a time when email was still considered to be a relatively new technology and fax machines were still in common use. Is it really shocking that a system that was established for the 20th century is unable to keep up with the 21st century? In the meantime, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers has reaffirmed its demands with even greater conviction. Critics have pointed out that the requests made by the Canadian Union of Postal Workers include an almost 20% raise in wages, a greater number of vacation days, longer personal leave, and even the ability to veto any operational changes, despite CUPW's insistence that its members are being squeezed and deserve more. There are many who may perceive that as more of an ultimatum than collective negotiation. Canadians are already suffering from the effects of inflation and high taxes, so is it fair to ask them to provide financial support for what appears to be a set of privileges that are no longer relevant? When a large number of families are experiencing difficulties in paying for groceries or covering their rent, is it ethical to ask taxpayers to contribute more? Furthermore, the timing of the assault exacerbates the harm that has already been done. Small businesses have already been under a great deal of pressure due to tariffs, disruptions in the supply chain, and increases in costs. Now they are confronted with the possibility of delays and increased expenses if they are compelled to depend on private couriers. To be honest, a significant number of people have already stopped using Canada Post. More and more firms are discovering alternate solutions, such as digital transfers, private shipping, and local courier networks to avoid the impact of strikes. After they make the change, they almost never go back. Death spirals start off in this manner. Each disruption causes more consumers to abandon the organization, which weakens it to an even greater extent until the point where the institution is certain to fail. Is it already too late for Canada Post to recover from that kind of erosion? Or is it still possible for them to do so? It is impossible to disregard the political dimension of this situation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gave the people of Canada assurances that things would remain stable. During his time as Governor of the Bank of Canada, and subsequently during his time as Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney was celebrated as an economic genius. He was held up as a symbol of competence and expertise. Nevertheless, what do Canadians witness in the present day? Taxpayers are left with the burden of paying the bill while the government struggles to implement temporary solutions for a postal service that is losing billions of dollars. In the eyes of critics, Carney is a symbol of the refined managerial elite that go on and on about reform and modernization while ultimately only succeeding in bringing about decay. Could it be said that this is the stability that Canadians were promised? Or is it instead the planned demolition of yet another public institution? When the Postal Service stops delivering mail, when trains cease to operate, when hospitals buckle under the pressure of demand, and when schools shut down, people start to question whether or not their government is still capable of providing them with the most fundamental of services. When services that Canadians always considered to be their right are crushed by the burden of bureaucracy, poor management, and political dithering, what happens to the public's confidence in the system? Canada Post is regarded by a number of experts as the prime example of the government's inability to successfully manage services. They maintain that socialism, or even the imposition of stringent government regulations, is an unavoidable precursor to inefficiency, strikes, and taxpayers being forced to pay an interminable number of bills. There are other people who perceive the situation in a different way. They see it as decades of political cowardice, in which consecutive governments were aware that the system was not working properly. Canada Post is a lot more complex narrative than it might initially appear to be, involving more than just letters and shipments. The fact that this is happening is an indication that the Canadian economy as a whole is in trouble, as well as that the government is not doing a good job of managing it. What trust should Canadians have in their leaders to manage healthcare, infrastructure, or national security if the country is unable to maintain something as fundamental as the delivery of mail? These are not hypothetical questions. They get straight to the point and address the question of whether Canada is capable of functioning as a modern nation in a period that is characterized by fast change. The strike that is taking place at Canada Post goes beyond the typical labor issue. It is a mirror that reflects the fissures that are present in the foundations of the country. It demonstrates what occurs when governments turn a blind eye to problems until they reach the point of crisis, when unions remain steadfast in their demands for obsolete demands, and when taxpayers are compelled to bear the financial burden of failure. Canadians are left with a question that they must now consider themselves. Are they willing to continue supporting a paradigm that has already failed, or will they insist on something that is more effective? And in the event that they do call for change, can their leaders at long last muster up enough fortitude to provide it? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel